Hey everybody, this is Alnash from the Unapologetic Women Empowerment Dynasty, and you're listening to the Unapologetic Women podcast, the show for women who choose to live their legacies, unleashed, unlimited, and unapologetic. If this is a space you're curious about, visit unapologetic-women.com. Today, we're talking about overcoming trauma with Melissa Dewar. Melissa is a final year Master of Architecture student at the University of Cambridge, Queen's College. Her academic studies are related to the field of technology and finance in relation to our built environment. Outside of her studies and career, she is involved with the Cambridge TEDx Society and Curus, which is the Real Estate Investment Society. She has also worked on a number of startup projects and businesses, one of which includes her own personal brand, which has been featured in Vogue, Elle, and New York Times. In 2022, she competed and led a team in the Heinz Student Real Estate Competition, where she explored the urban significance of the Centre Pompidou. In 2021, she was selected as one of 20 women to compete in the finals of Miss Universe Great Britain, where she used her voice to raise awareness of several philanthropic initiatives. She has again been selected to do the Miss Universe Great Britain finals this year, but as you've heard, she has opted out of this decision. You want to listen to the episode to find out why. She's also competed in a number of half marathons for various courses. Her last half marathon was in Paris in 2022. Thanks so much for joining us. This is the incredible Melissa.
Yes, let's do it.
It's so cool to have somebody so enthusiastic about getting started with a podcast.
Because I have my matcha latte with me. I'm like, because it's 10 p.m. here, I'm like, I need to be alert, and matcha does that.
It keeps you awake, or it keeps you
Alert.
without keeping you awake afterwards?
Yeah, it's not like coffee at all. It's very like sustained like alertness. Is what I would say. Well, for me anyway. Maybe it's different for other people, but
I'm leaving this piece into the podcast for all my other caffeine-loving coffee drinkers. There's an alternative for us at nighttime because I'm being more disciplined with my coffee intake, which is a passion of mine. I'm even thinking of getting an Unapologetic Women coffee made because why not?
why not?
Matcha needs to go on the list. So thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for being up at 10 o'clock at night on a podcast. Truly appreciate it.
No worries at all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So it's interesting for me because when this podcast started, it was really aimed at a more mature demographic, women coming on, because it's about sharing wisdom. It's about sharing our experiences, what we've learned along the way, to inspire other women, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds to kind of go, oh yeah, we have a valuable part to play in society. And then I started meeting incredible young women such as you. And I thought, oh, damn, we have a lot to learn from you. Not taking away from, I do believe that older women need to start speaking out more, need to share their wisdom more for younger women. But it really is a symbiotic relationship between women that's required at the moment. So let's start with a question that I always start with and allow your story to unfold through the answer.
Okay.
What does it mean to you at the beautiful age of, how old are you now?
Just turned 26. I feel strange saying that because I was at 25 only 2 weeks ago.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
At the gorgeous age of 26, I have to really think back what it felt like to be 26. What does it mean for you to be an unapologetic woman?
I think there are two elements to this. I think for me, firstly, is to be fearless, and the second is to be bold. And I think they kind of interlink and tie in with each other. But I think they're two things that are hard to do in our age, and even as well, young and old. I think it could be hard to be fearless and to be bold. But there are many things I could have said, but I feel like those were the two that came to my mind.
What do you mean by fearless?
I think for me, feel a woman that is fearless is someone who is unafraid to be herself and is unafraid to share her views to other people, um, and is unafraid to say or call out when things are wrong in her opinion, or will fight for what is right and what is just. And in terms of being then bold, that ties into the element of like raising your voice, sharing your story, stepping out and inspiring other people.
I wrote a blog a couple of years ago about the silence of the feminine and how I believe this is the time when we get to reclaim our voices, to invite the masculine back to heart instead of being so much in head.
Mm,
And so when you talk about us being fearless in terms of us reclaiming our voices, unafraid to share our view, to share our story, to share our values and what's important to us,
mm,
I'm
mm,
reminded of the fact that right now, so many women are still terrified of speaking up because of the judgment, because we on the one hand talk about having an inclusive society of everybody and everybody's views, as long as that is in harmony with the crowd who wants the inclusive society. And I'm
mm,
kind of wondering, what do you think is the reason why people have become so unappreciative of diversity, unappreciative of us all having our own values and thoughts and opinions and voices, that's created this culture of fear that we see everywhere in the world?
I think, gosh, it's a big question. I think some of it has to stem from, to some degree, saying something that wouldn't upset someone else. I think that is definitely happening a lot in our culture, in that, there are all these political views, all these um, kind of almost belief systems, and people believe in this, people believe in that, and you don't want to say something that upsets someone. So I think some of that can stem from that, and that then suppresses other people's voices and opinions. I think I remember actually that being the case during kind of COVID. I think there were a lot of people that had certain opinions about, um, not wanting to take a vaccine, and then other people that did want to take it, and then other people's voices were kind of shut out. And that has kind of, to some degree, been a history of humankind, if you know what I mean, where people have had opinions, but certain things have been in place where other minorities have not been able to share that. And as well, it's very prevalent in third world countries where women in particular are not able to kind of share their views, or they're not able to have an education, or what. Yeah, so there are things that I think we definitely need to work through and have. I think for me the problem stems from, in trying to be more kind of, per se, inclusive, we've actually probably become less. So in trying to reach a kind of perfect system, where everyone is kind of included, we've kind of actually excluded a lot of people's voices.
And
um,
personally, I'm all for exclusivity. And here's why. I believe that we have a huge world with space for everybody. And I do feel that we all get to have a place in the sun, but we don't
mm,
all have to be inclusive. I think that there's confusion that comes in when we start using the word inclusive culture, in that it means that we have to tolerate, accept, make okay the values of
mm,
other people, instead of going, oh, no, no, you get to have your values and I get to have my values. We get to
mm,
respect each other as human beings, but we don't have to agree, and we don't have to all be happy about everybody else's values and lifestyle choices and all those things, right?
mm.
We get to
Yeah.
go, you do you, boo, and I get to do me, and we all get to live in this beautiful world and co-create a magnificent experience. And I feel like that's where the confusion has come in, especially in modern day. And so it's interesting for me to observe this. But now this is what I want to ask.
Yes.
For a woman to come on and say, well, unapologetic is about being fearless and bold and using your voice at the age of 26 tells me, and I have the
Mm.
unfair advantage of, I do know some of your story, but it tells me this woman has lived some stuff. Like, there's no ways that you become this confident, this certain, and this unapologetic by the age of 26, unless life has gifted you with some fire. Let's put it that
Special
way.
genetics. No, I'm joking.
Sure, we could say that.
That's just what I say to everyone. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Not true.
The superwoman.
Yeah.
So, with Grace, would you share some of your story with our listeners of, well, what did Melissa live that got her to take a stance for being an unapologetic woman at such a young age?
Absolutely. It's always lovely hearing other people's perspectives of your story and things that you've been through, because I think like the first time we spoke, it's something like my life story is just my life story, and whenever I kind of share it, and or whenever I've been to events or I've kind of been talking about it, people are like, whoa, like hang on, this is like actually something really special. But whenever I've viewed, I'm like, oh yeah, it's just another thing, you know. So
It's
I don't
life.
kind of tend to kind of put a, and then when I think of my age as well, I don't tend to kind of mix the two and two together. But it's always really nice to like hear someone else's perspective, so thank you for being so kind. But I guess we can kind of start from the beginning. So a little bit about me. I was born in London to a British dad and a mother who was from Turkey, and my family at a very young age moved to the Middle East. And I guess you could say that growing up was, I think, in general, quite a turbulent time. My mother had quite severe kind of mental health problems, which essentially meant that she was quite violent and essentially wreaked kind of havoc in the household. Really, it was always kind of very turbulent. There was never kind of a stable environment, I think, growing up. There's kind of one minute I'm at school, the next minute I'm at home, and there's police over, and there's arguments kind of between my mum and my dad. And it eventually reached a point where the situation got so bad that my dad had to divorce and separate from my mother, because she was, calling the police on him, saying that he was doing this, accusing him of kind of ridiculous things, when actually she was cheating behind his back, which we later found out. So from that point, I had, in general, growing up, a very close relationship with my dad. I would say, we were like this close, and we had a very special relationship. So I think to some degree, it was a very tricky decision that my dad eventually had to come back to the UK to protect his health, and he was, probably close to going to prison out in Dubai because of the accusations my mom was making. And it's quite interesting, actually, as a British man that in that kind of area at the time, he didn't have many rights. And my mom was Turkish, and she had more rights than he did, so she automatically had the legal advantage. And even during kind of the court proceedings that initially took place out in the Middle East, there was an automatic advantage towards her, even though I was saying that I want to be with my dad. My mom is like doing all these things, she's abusive. I don't want to like be with her. So it was definitely a very tricky time when he had to leave, and we suspected that my mom might do something, like she could, take me away, or we had that suspicion. So actually, before my dad left, he left like a secret telephone
Mhm.
in my teddy bear, and he said to me, if anything like happens, like insane, just ring this number on here. Then he also left like a little prayer with me, which was actually the Lord's Prayer. And those two things were like the only things that were left, and then he had to go. And lo and behold, of course, something did happen. My mom essentially kidnapped me in the Middle East, and I was taken around kind of, I would say, two or three different flats in Middle East, whilst my dad went to the UK, then came back to try and find me again. And then in those kind of flats, I wasn't allowed to go to school. I had was allowed to go see friends. I was basically kind of like confined essentially. My freedom was taken away from me. I couldn't have access to things that I would have loved to, or any child that would have had. So I think it was a very, very, I would say, I think, dark time, and this was at the age of 8 as well. So definitely very, very young. And I think from that time you have to. It's amazing what the human mind can do, because you think an 8-year-old child can't do very much, right? But I was able to know that I had a secret telephone. I was able to keep track of where I was. I was able to, you know, be very alert as to what my mom was doing, reporting that to my dad, taking photos of things. So I was like, maybe it was just me. Maybe I was just like insanely clever, but I just knew that I had to do these things, and that would get me eventual freedom. But around that, unfortunately, my dad did not leave a charger. So I ended up losing charge of my phone, and there was kind of a 6-month period of my dad. I lost contact with my dad, and I was taken to another flat. And actually, when we were out with my mum one time, I saw that there was a charger that someone was using, which was the same as my one. So when my mum was looking, I used that charger. So there was those kind of moments of kind of, I would say, light bulb moments where you just would not expect that from an 8-year-old child. Um, and anyway, yeah, during those kind of that period of staying in these different flats, I was essentially physically abused. I was beaten up whenever I said, I wanted to see my dad or my friends. That was not allowed. It was my mum's way or no way at all. Which, as you can imagine, the mental cost of that eventually, I think, does get to you. And however kind of, you could say, bold I was in trying to tell my dad where I was, it did eventually reach a point where I nearly actually gave up and tried to commit suicide. And that was an extremely hard thing, and kind of almost standing there at like the building edge, I um honestly felt like like, I would say, heavenly intervention to stop me from like falling down. And I wouldn't say I grew up kind of religious or anything, but during this time I just prayed to a God, and I was like, just, if something exists in the world, please help me. I need your help. I need like freedom from this. But yeah, anyway, so from that point, I thank God I didn't jump. So otherwise I would be here today.
I want
So
to interject there though, because I think that it's really important for people to understand, as somebody who sat with the pills, there's something extraordinary that happens when we choose not to die. There's
mm,
something
mm,
extraordinary that happens when we choose not to die. And I'm not saying choose to live, right? It's choosing not to die. And I don't know if this is the same for you, but it was a conscious choice of, I am staying on this plane. Like, and if I'm
mm,
going to stay on this plane, I'm going to be unavailable for certain things that got me to this point in the first place. And not that my life changed externally like overnight, but it's a choice that gets a decision that gets made to not die, which is so powerful. So if anybody is listening today, because this is such a, you're rattling through your story quite quickly, and I'm very conscious that it's a very hard knocking story for women who maybe are sitting there today listening and going, holy shit, I'm finding myself not in the same circumstances, but the same sensations that's like resonating in my body for me.
mm.
There's something really beautiful and powerful when a woman chooses not to die. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of hoping that's a choice that more women are going to start making, whether it's physical or emotional or spiritual death
Mm.
that they're
Mm.
staring in the face right now.
Yeah, it's well, yeah, it is a conscious choice, and it's a tough one, because to some degree the easy thing would be to do that, right? The easy thing would be that, okay, this thing is so hard, um, then I'm just gonna give up.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing is that you can always choose never to give up, and you can choose to fight. And that's what happened. So, obviously, um, to some degree, that my case, maybe I might not have been rescued. Maybe that might not have happened, but the ultimate thing is you still made that choice, and I think that is very beautiful in
You
itself.
made that choice and you called upon the universe. It's that, like, okay, that's it, universe. I in and of myself don't have what it takes anymore. You step up and you support me now. Like, you step up and you start showing me something, and
Mm,
then being available to see it. Even if it is seeing a charger, like, that's the universe showing up.
mm, mm. And yeah, I guess to kind of continue the story from that point as well, um so yeah, essentially then was moved to Turkey, and at that point I had my charger back. I was able to charge my phone, um, and there were kind of crazy moments where when we were out there, where I had the telephone in my teddy bear, like my mom's mom would come to grab it, and she never felt it, and like I could feel it, and I was like looking at it like, is this like crazy? Like this is like honestly a miracle. This woman is holding something and doesn't feel that anything's in there, but I do. It's. I mean, it was honestly incredible, um, and from that point, I managed to get my dad to track me down. He was able to find me, and then we carried out another long kind of 8-month court proceeding where my dad actually had me in Turkey cells with him. And I actually just remember the first time when we kind of saw each other. It was, I think it'd been a good like year and a half to 2 years when we had saw each other, and it felt so strange. I felt like this like almost alien sensation of hugging him again, because it had just been so long. And I honestly, it's one of those like really vivid memories that I still remember now. um and from that point we kind of planned a way to get out of there, but during that time that we were there, we kind of just led a life there in Turkey. I ended up going to school for a bit. We spent time together. He was working like remotely, which, this was like way back in the day when, when remote working was
When it
like
wasn't a
not,
thing.
yeah, I know. So, he was having to still do business and like then rescue me. And during this time as well, there was amazing people that were involved, MPs, people in parliament, there was people involved in the British embassy. It was a big team of people who, really kind of went above and beyond to get to where I'm now. And I really credit to Reunite, which is a child abduction charity, which helped a lot. And yeah, essentially through a lot of court proceedings, my dad managed to get custody of me and then take me out of Turkey and bring me back to the UK. Um, and that I was around kind of 10, 11 around then. So then kind of, I guess you kind of have the event, and then there's the whole process of kind of rehabilitation, um, kind of rehab like just learning how to do normal life again, because you've kind of gone through almost like a shock, and you have to recover from that shock. And that in itself is, I would say, a long process. When I came back, I was below the class in everything. I had like 10% in maths. I was like, uh, awful grades. And I remember, my teacher saying, you won't probably even get to university with that. Um, and I was lucky that my dad really pushed me, my grandmother really pushed me, and I had that support system in place, like from my dad's family, that really got me, I think, back on track. I think if I didn't have that, I think that would have been really hard.
Mm.
And I think that is actually the problem that you see with a lot of kind of parent-child cases, in that both parents are a little bit crazy. And then you kind of go from one crazy situation to another, and the child never fully recovers. So I was very, very blessed. And, eventually I surrounded myself with, I classify myself as a Christian believer in Jesus. And I surrounded myself with people that uplifted me in that way. And I've spoken in my church around this subject and been able to impact people and be like, you really can turn your life around if you kind of put your mind to it. Yeah.
And kudos to your father. I
Yeah.
just want
Yes.
to say that as well. I can't even imagine as a parent what he was going through, um, and being
Yeah.
resourceful enough to work remotely and to do whatever it took to get you to safety. Um, Wow. Like, kudos to dad. Thanks, dad.
I think, yeah, no, absolutely. I think he was, to some degree, I think, very lucky in that he was the founder of his own business. He could kind of go if he wanted to and be wherever he wanted to. But of course, having to say to clients, I'm kind of in the middle of like a personal crisis, but I will be like doing work for you. But just like, and just, I think for me, his values that, obviously I was a really young age, but he demonstrated exceptional values of strength and determination. He never gave up. Even when I remember apparently my grandmother said to him to give up, don't pursue trying to get her out because you're just gonna like drain yourself.
Mm.
Of getting her out are impossible. And there are many people that said that it was impossible for him, but he never gave up. And those values are things that I've really taken from.
Wow. So this, so
Sorry.
you are. Oh, and I'm pausing because I also want this to sink in for the listeners. I think that it's I'm like you. Our stories is just our stories. We've lived it. It's kind of like, yeah, we've told it like a few times. It's not impressive for us. And
Yeah.
so we sometimes don't allow for people to just take in and allow them the opportunity to go, what must it have felt like as a child? Having
Mm,
compassion for the mother as well, because she clearly was not in her right mind and
mm,
doing whatever she thought was best from her very warped space. Good people do bad things, not making it okay. But
mm,
I'm at that stage of life where I can have compassion for all the players because, from a spiritual perspective, we understand the enormous pain that somebody like that is in mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to do crazy shit.
mm,
Um, allowing compassion for that, allowing compassion for your dad's family in how hard it must have been to support him and to see him go through that. I've got two boys, and I think I would go crazy if something like that had to happen to them, and I would want to protect them. So there's so many players in my mind that I'm like kind of going to all of these spaces and going, oh, that's a lot. Like,
yeah.
that's a lot. That's a lot for a young girl. It's a lot for a young soul to choose to go through as
Mm,
part of a life journey, which had to have huge purpose. And then, of course, you were blessed with extraordinary beauty, physical beauty. And so, do you want to talk about how you used that
mm.
and your life and bringing the two together and what happened next? And so, what's happening now?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, with always struggles, there's always the after story, right? Which is either good or bad, but in this case, it's a happy ending. Oh, but yeah, I think from that process, I think, as I mentioned, there was a long process of healing. And I feel like with trauma, you kind of go through, I think, 3 or 4 stages really. There's kind of that post-traumatic stress. There's kind of the denial of it. You kind of deny it that ever happened. I almost remember I denied that my mom did that, and used to say to people who, where's your mom? When you see with your dad, I was like, oh, she died. Like, she doesn't exist. So I kind of just went through the phase of burying it in the ground. Then there was a phase of like acceptance and forgiveness. So that's the phase of like, you accept what's happened to you, and then you forgive that person. And that is, I think, the hardest thing, because to some degree that is the thing that I think releases you and heals you the most, is that element of like imagining you're with your mom or whoever has hurt you and be like, I forgive you for everything you've done, and I choose to do that. And I think that for me was like that moment of like complete healing and complete kind of turnaround in kind of the way I viewed my story. And then the fourth stage is like the empowerment stage, where you kind of actually like, this is something that's empowering and can impact someone else and change their life.
Before
And
we
actually,
carry
I
on,
literally,
yeah.
sorry.
So before we carry on, Melissa, I want to touch on the forgiveness piece because here's why. I wouldn't
Mm,
forgive for a long time. I have my own story. I wouldn't forgive for a long time because I had a story running in the back of my head that if I forgave, it meant that I was okay with what happened and that I had to let that person back into my life.
Mm.
I was only ready to forgive when I finally understood that no, it doesn't mean that I'm okay with what happened. And it doesn't
Mm.
mean that I have to let you back into my life. Forgiveness is, and you don't even have to say it to the person, right? It's an
Yeah.
internal process that we get to go through and understand that it's the soul having a human experience, and we're all co-creating our own evolution and each other's evolution. And sometimes our evolution comes through the most atrocious of
Mm.
events. And
Mm.
so we can forgive the soul because we can finally connect again to this person has a soul as well, a soul and the human identity, the human personality. We can forgive because we want to heal. It's a
Mm.
cleaning of the slate from our side, but it
Mm.
doesn't mean that they have to come back into our lives, or that we are saying we're okay with what you did. It's not that. And I feel like it's important for
Mm.
people to get this because there's so much resistance to forgiveness.
Yeah.
And forgiveness is not about that person. It's
Mm.
about you wiping the slate clean for yourself so that you go, forgive you. It is what it was. I clean it between us so that I can move forward in love. What did it take for you to get to a stage of, I'm ready to forgive because now I understand it's about me, it's not even about you?
Yeah, absolutely spot on with everything you said. I think, you can definitely, as I call it, like forgiving someone at a distance. Because, some people you have to, you can forgive them, but you can't have them enter into your life again. And that it's a hard thing to grasp, but it's also sometimes for the best. And sometimes you have to also think about and protect yourself, which is extremely important to do as well. Um, and I guess for me, the process of it, wow, it's it was a very hard process. I think I had to go through several kind of uh, rounds of it, if you know what I mean, rounds of kind of forgiveness, because um, essentially what drove me to it was to some degree my faith. It's to some degree, well, if we look at all world faiths, they all are very difficult. It's hard to be a Christian, it's hard to be a Muslim, it's hard to be whatever faith you are. But I think in particular the Christian faith, it's so countercultural. You would think that I shouldn't have forgave her because she did all these bad things to me, right? Like why should she even be forgiven? But that's, I think, the beauty of the Jesus story, is that a man dies on the cross to take on those things and to forgive all of humanity. So if that can happen, then I should be able to humble myself and forgive my mom. So I think it's that, like, that was what drove me to kind of be like, look, I'm gonna forgive her. And I'm gonna release this. And I think there's such beauty in kind of almost like releasing it. Um, and letting it go. And I think you can only do that through forgiveness. And whatever your methodology is, it's still kind of at the heart the same thing for everyone. It's that kind of core thing of you're releasing, you're letting it go.
It's the point of true liberation, and I feel like if we can understand this, forgiveness is you no longer have power over me.
Yeah,
That's actually what forgiveness is. Because
yeah,
until we forgive, our perpetrators have power over us because we have to blame them. We have to be afraid of them. We have to be angry at them. So they are still consuming our thoughts. They're still consuming our energy. Even though they're carrying on with their lives, we have literally given our power to them. And forgiveness is liberation of that process. It's about, oh no,
mm,
no, no, no. You don't take up any more space in my mind. You don't take up any more space in my energy or in my heart.
yeah,
I forgive and release you. And in that, I take full power and ownership of me again. You
mm,
have nothing over me anymore.
mm,
Such a powerful process when we start understanding that.
mm, mm. Absolutely. And I guess to some degree as well, on a practical level, of course, there's the act of forgiving someone. And I think afterwards as well, I was told to like almost kind of do like affirmations almost over that, being like, okay, affirm like, you know, that, you know, declare that over yourself, being like, okay, I forgive my mom for this, this, and this. So I had kind of a process of more of a structured forgiveness routine, kind
Mm.
of having kind of always like these declarations I was saying every day, being like, okay, I forgive this, this, and this. God forgives this, this, and this. I do this and this. So there was an element of kind of more structured healing and structured kind of kind of trying to restore myself in that way. Yeah.
Beautiful. Then you took back your power and you went on to one of the greatest stages.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, so as I mentioned, obviously I then went through my empowerment phase, and when I was at university, well, after university, sorry, I was in my kind of year out, um, and had kind of a dream to do like Miss Universe, the competition. And I remember watching this video of this lady. So I follow this lady on social media called Xenia Tushimidva, and she is a kind of an influencer, I would say. And but she came from like very humble background, you know, very small family, didn't really have like lots of money, but she really paved a career for herself, and she made her own narrative, and her own story, which was beautiful. And she went on to represent, I think it was Sweden, in their Miss Universe. Well, I think she got on to I think she won, came runner up, sorry, in the Miss um, Switzerland, sorry. I'm getting it wrong. Miss Switzerland finals, I think. And then she then moved to London, and started her like banking career, then set up her own company. So I watched her TED talk, and she talked about kind of this importance of kind of stepping out of your comfort zone, sharing your story, and empowering other people. And I was like, okay, I think I want to be like her, and I'm gonna like enter something like she's entered, because I draw a lot of parallels between her life and my life. I was like, I'm just gonna do it. So I had this like funny obsession with this like with doing this thing. And everyone was like asking me like, where does this come from? And I was like, I just watched a TED talk and that like really inspired me. Which is, yeah, it's so like random. And then I was just started, well, I was in my second year at Cambridge, and I entered the Miss Universe GB competition, and I got through to the finals. And it was actually during kind of COVID time as well. So it's a really weird time. And during that kind of period of kind of going up to the competition, I very much, my whole kind of advocacy was about, well, A, parent-child abduction, but also B, about helping women, you know, people raise their voices, because I think we do live in a culture where, especially certain topics are very much taboo. You know, I think of things like even rape or more sexual assault and things like that. They're very hard things to be very vocal about, and I think we need to kind of normalize that, because that's where healing begins, is when you talk and when you vocalize your emotions, because that's what kind of also happened with me. Like the moment I internalize it, that almost destroys someone, because you kind of have to, it's only you that can kind of deal with it, but that never is enough. Yeah.
And to talk from a healed space, you know, I feel like there's a responsibility that comes from where we talk and where on our journey we are when we talk. So when we talk publicly, my beliefs are we do it from a space of we've done the work, we've healed, and now we share. When we are going through it, our responsibility is to find the sacred space held for us to talk and to share and to work through our things. I think sometimes what we see is a lot of women who are not healed speaking out very loudly in spaces, and you can feel the anger, you can feel the fear, you can feel the resentment coming through. And yes, it stokes people up because they're passionate, but I don't think that's the answer. You know, for me, the answer is a woman comes gracefully and certainly and confidently and grounded and go, I lived through rape.
Yeah.
Here's what I chose after. This is who I chose to become, because it was an event, and I refused to define myself, to identify myself because of an event that happened in my life.
Yeah.
But this is how it's made me stronger, right?
Mm.
And so I do agree. We need to start talking more about the taboo subjects, not because we want to convince people about things, not because we want to change their minds, not because we want to drive our personal agenda, but it's
Mm.
time for us to start understanding and honoring the fact that we're all having a very human experience, and it's not all rainbows and sunshine. And
Yeah.
the more we can start talking again, the more we can start going, it's okay, whatever you're going through, it doesn't mean that you're broken or faulty or that it's your fault or any of those things. Let's start talking about the things that are happening so that
Mm.
people can stop feeling so isolated and as though something is defaulted within them, that they are now going through all of this. It's very
Mm.
isolating. It's very horrible to go through something and thinking it's just me. It's just
Yeah.
me. I can't speak about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really resonate as well with what you said about like, you know, people that speak from a not healed place, but they often, I find they kind of project their internal like anger or their internal hurt onto their audience. And
Yes.
I think to some degree, I think you have to, I think in yourself be very self-aware of that, because even myself, I found that when I was initially talking like at the very beginning about this, I think I found that I necessarily wasn't 100% healed, and there were some things that I think even then I was like, I think this is something that I need to forgive on and
Yeah.
I need to work on, because I don't quite feel that I felt that I projected that hurt onto my audience
Yeah.
or onto someone I was talking to. Because yeah, I think it's very like, it's hard, it's a very like, it's, you might think that you're healed, but then actually you might project and you realize that actually there's still some things to work through. So it's reaching, I think, that point of like when you share your story, that your audience feel empowered and they're able to see it, I think, as an inspiring thing. Because I think when you talk about it from a non-healed place, you're more of a victim than a victor. And I think you want to be the victor one, the person that's come over and above that. Whereas when you're talking about it from non-healed, you're the victim, aren't you? So that's the way I think of it.
So, how does a little girl with a telephone teddy bear feel standing on the stage of Miss Universe?
Yeah, absolutely terrifying. I think I had a nervous toilet break a few times. No, I'm joking. um, but yeah, jokes aside, it honestly I think was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. I didn't kind of necessarily, I had a very academic background. I was very comfortable with like being very academic and kind of nerdy and kind of, sharing my like, very academic kind of views on life and politics. But going on stage and sharing what I've been through and was scary. It is something that requires a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of fearlessness. And I think that's where I really got to live out those two things of being bold and being fearless, because
Mm.
I kind of said, F you, I don't care what other people think. I'm gonna just like share this and I'm gonna inspire people. And if some people don't like it, that's their problem. But I'm gonna go do it. So that was kind of the mindset. And yeah.
So, I have a cheeky question, because as somebody who's never partaken in any of these beauty pageants, as most of us, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people participate in them. There's two stories that is told to the rest of humanity. The one is that it's a group of highly competitive women who is like, it's only about the crown. And then there's sometimes the story of, no, this is a bunch of really passionate, heart-centered women who come together for their causes, and it is supportive and collaborative and in the spirit and harmony of women.
Yeah.
What was your experience? Was it feisty, fierce, competitive, or is this where women actually really get to support each other and form close bonds and relationships, and everybody is a winner even though there's only one crown.
Yeah, the very good question. I think, these things are important to talk about. I will be honest, I'm very mixed. So I would say that even before I entered the competition, I was very hot and cold. So I had moments where I was like, is this actually for me? Is this not? But I'm very glad I did it, because in the year, the group that I had, I think they were extremely inspiring women. There was actually one lady who did it in a wheelchair. And I think that was like incredible. I mean, they really pushed the limits, that show. So I think, but that being said, there were some girls who were that kind of competitive type.
Mm.
So there was some people that were like, I would say probably 80% of people I met were genuinely really nice people. And they were women that had charities, who were, of course, aesthetically very beautiful as well. And I think this could be like the judgment that I think people can make initially. And even I made sometimes. I was like, okay, she's got like this kind of body. This must mean that like she's really stupid and stuff like that. But that's not true. you know? So
That's a
even
huge
myself,
one.
I'm the victim of my own.
That's a huge one, right? She's really beautiful, so therefore she can't be really intelligent.
Yeah,
Um, she must be very superficial. How much time does she
yeah.
spend doing her hair and her makeup and posing for photos? And the reality is, it's time for us to re-embrace beauty and an appreciation of beautiful women. I look at beautiful women and go, oh my God, you have so much discipline to take that amount of time to look after your hair and your makeup and your dress and your all of this. And I don't look like this every day. Because I love doing sports. So for me, being active is more important than being really well dressed and made up. You know,
Mm,
it is what it is, and it's the lifestyle that I choose.
mm,
How and I feel like, especially in that environment, we can see the worst or the best come out of women. One
mm,
of my missions at the moment is just restore trust between women, because especially high achieving women, I feel, even in business, don't really trust each other. We haven't yet learned how to collaborate and co-create. We still have a very competitive mindset in business as strong achieving women. How do you think we can start doing it better, Melissa? How do you
mm.
see we can start doing it better as women?
This might be my Einstein moment. Yeah, I think it's so true. I think this is actually a real problem, deep rooted. It's not a man's problem. I feel like men don't have this problem. I feel like this is definitely a woman's thing. I think a lot of it comes from comparison. I feel like it's deep rooted comparison that I think, and to some degree as well, this ties in a little bit with beauty pageants, in that, it's easy to go into that competition and be like, I'm going to compare myself, but you'll absolutely kill yourself in doing that. This is what actually is so great about it, that you can go in there and you should not absolutely compare yourself, but view that other person you're looking at as a source of inspiration, and what can you take from them? And I think the key thing, I think, is to address comparison, because from that we could then collaborate, because the moment you get rid of comparison, you're able to work better and understand each other. And to some degree as well, that's ties in a little bit, I think, with our social media age, of kind of looking on Instagram, this person has this, I don't have this. Or even with like on LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn can be pretty bad as well, to be honest with you. So I think the key is delves in from our own, I think, internal insecurities, um, of comparison. And I think the moment we get rid of that, I think we solve all our problems.
Because the comparison is always on the external stuff, right? We don't know what's really
Yeah.
going on inside another woman. And I feel like on the inside, we all have beauty, we all
Mm,
have strength, we all
mm,
have insecurities, we all
mm,
have our ups and we all have our downs. And if we can just stop getting past the, wow, well, what does this look like? And what does she have? What does she not have? How is she better than me? How is she worse than me? If we can just get past that, I'll say we need to stop minding our own business, quite frankly, and just go, I really want to get to know this person, the person, not what they're doing, the person. And that takes time. It takes time and it takes dedication and it takes some perseverance to really get to know somebody and build a friendship. But if we could start as women getting back to basics, getting back to connecting, I think we could turn this world around. But it's going to take
Yeah,
some time.
absolutely. It is quite amazing in that I think, yeah, women are so different to men in that way. I often like talk to my boyfriend about this kind of stuff, and it's just like the world view is so different. It's like I feel like men don't compare at all. They're just like, yeah, like
Just get
they're
on
just
with
like,
it.
he's doing great, that's fine. Whereas like whereas like women are like, oh my God, like what are you wearing? What are you doing? They're like it's just like extra like brain energy that we use on such unnecessary stuff.
Now, speaking of time, I am quite aware of the fact that we've been talking for quite some time, and there's so much more that I wanted to delve into with you. But I also trust the process. So I want to wrap this up by asking Melissa, what is it that you take an unapologetic stance for in the world?
Mm. Mm. I think for me, my unapologetic stance would be, yeah, to share my story in a way that empowers other people. Um, and whatever they think or whatever they take from it, then that's, something that I can do to help them and help them be better people and help them see the world, differently, or perhaps even impact them in a meaningful way. I actually, even tonight, before I had this call, shared this story with a friend of mine who was going through a very difficult, somewhat similar situation, but in a relationship sense. But yeah, she took a lot from my story. And I think, yeah.
Am I right in saying that you are getting ready for another Miss Universe?
No,
Not?
not this year. I decided not this year, that my focus would be on other things.
Okay. What is the focus on? Just cheekily going to ask. Just
So
curious.
yeah, I recently finished my master's degree from Cambridge, as I mentioned. So my future goal is, well, either to start a company or get a job. So two of those things is kind of on my
Start a
horizon at
company
the
or get a job. I mean, yeah, two very different life choices to make. And yeah, so many people to introduce you to either way that you go. So we should have another conversation. Darling, thank
Absolutely.
you. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Really, I have so much admiration for you for choosing to use your voice. I don't want to say in a powerful way. I think that word is almost overused, and I think that it doesn't do justice to the grace with which you use your voice. And sometimes, as women, we are more potent when we are graceful than when we try to be powerful.
Mm. Mm. I love that. I totally agree.
So thank
I'm
you.
powerful in the gym though. That is
Yes, yes, strong, powerful. Yeah, yeah. But I think that there's a lot to be said for grace, and it's something that's as a gender, a lot of us have lost along the way because of our struggle and because of our wanting to be strong all the time and wanting to be motivational all the time. And yeah, subtlety and grace has
Mm,
always been one of the fundamental feminine gifts um,
mm.
that we have brought to this world. And I just feel like women like you are bringing that back. And so for that, I want to say thank you.
No, well, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
To all our listeners, well, I know this was a long one, but I am so much to take away from this episode. If you are going through any form of struggle right now, I hope that you will take courage from the story that Melissa so beautifully shared with us today. And I want you to always remember there's something that brings the universe, God, your angels, whatever you believe in, to rise up to meet you the moment that you choose not to die and the moment you choose to surrender and say, I, in and of myself, cannot go on. You step up for me. And God, the universe, always does. But you have to be open and willing to see it as well. Miracles happen in the tiniest of things. It could be listening to this podcast today. This could have been your miracle. It could be seeing somebody else with a charger. It could be seeing Melissa's post on Instagram. Whatever it is, you'll feel it. You'll feel it. And it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about us starting to feel again instead of suppressing our emotions, because there's such beautiful guides for us. And we are missing out on majority of our guidance in life when we attempt to numb the pain or attempt to numb ourselves through whatever medium. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. This has been a long enough episode. Thank you for joining us. Have an amazing day further. And never forget, we get to live our legacies unleashed, unlimited, and unapologetic. Cheers. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at The Unapologetic Woman and on LinkedIn at L-Naj. And if you're interested in experiencing the Unapologetic Woman Friendwork Soiree, book in for our next open meeting at unapologetic-women.as.me/unapologetic. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.